going to tell you what it feels like to stand on the starting line in Olympic Games, ready to live a childhood dream, but have that dream look nothing like you imagined. My Olympic dream started when I was just 10 years old. I remember watching the Barcelona Olympics on television, and I was really inspired by the women's distance running events going around, and I remember turning to my mum and dad and saying, I'm going to do that one day. And ever since then, I just became obsessed with becoming an Olympian. You know, I was obsessed with the idea of reaching the pinnacle of my sport. And I wouldn't play games in the neighborhood with the other kids unless they were named after the Olympics. You know, it had to be the hopscotch Olympics, the knock and run Olympics. I used to spend hours in my room going through mock Olympic medal ceremonies. I'd build a podium out of encyclopedias and yellow pages, and I'd just stand up on top spot and sing out the Australian anthem and with hand on heart, and I'd just keep going for hours. In my teenage years, I struggled with an eating disorder. It started when I was about 13, and I really felt the pressure of society's message, that young girls, the same message that it is today, that to be thinner is to be better. And despite struggling with this eating disorder, I qualified for the Sydney Olympics when I was just 16 years old. I was in year 11 at school. It was a really big deal. The Olympics were about to be in my own backyard, basically. And about 3 weeks after qualifying, after being selected in the Shadow Olympic team and measured for the uniform, I suffered my first stress fracture in my hip and was told by the doctors that there's no way that I'd make it back in time for the Olympics. I was devastated. I remember just being so heartbroken, and you know, running was who I was. It was where I found my identity, and without it, I just felt like a nobody. I got saved during this time when a girl from school, a new girl, walked over to me at lunchtime and she said, I heard about your injury, and I just want you to know that I've been praying for you, and I've got some friends that are praying for you, and I'm just believing that God's got a great plan for your life. And you know, I grew up with a warped sense of who God was. I thought that God was this huge being up in the sky that was going to strike me down if I did something wrong. And I actually thought that because I was injured, I was being punished for something that I'd done wrong. And then I went to church with this new friend, Lisa. She's here today. And I heard about Jesus. I heard the gospel. I heard about this God who had died for me, who had numbered the hairs on my head, who cared about the intricate details of my life. And I accepted his love and grace, and I never looked back. God led me through anorexia, and I was fully healed by the thoughts and the behaviors that come with that mental illness by age 19. 2 more failed attempts at making the Olympics. Athens in 2004, selected again for the Shadow Olympic team, measured for the uniform, another stress fracture. 2008, Beijing, in the shape of my life, and measured for the uniform, selected in the Shadow team, injured. It was at this point that I wanted to give up. I remember saying to my husband, I'm done. I said to my coach, I'm doing something else with my life. And I got an opportunity soon after this to go to Portland and try and rehab my foot, which is where the injury was, to try and rehab my foot in time for the Beijing Olympics. I ended up flying to Portland, still pretty negative about my situation, not really knowing how it was going to pan out. And in Portland, I met Ugandan athlete Julius Achon. Julius and I became immediate friends. We connected straight away. And I remember him asking me, how's your foot? And I was just really honest with him. I said, I was giving him the whole woe is me story. This would be the 3rd Olympics that I'll miss. And he said, if I told you my story and where I've come from, your foot problem would become very small. Yeah. He began to tell me about being born into poverty in northern Uganda. He was captured at age 11 and forced to be a child soldier with the LRA. He was held at a rebel camp for 3 months and, seeing his chance to escape, ran for his life with 15 other boys that had also been captured from his village. 9 of them were shot, 6 of them survived, and 1 of them was Julius. He made it home to his family and he was desperate to get an education, but his mother and father couldn't afford to send him to school. And he heard that if he became a good runner, then maybe he'd get a scholarship to go to school. So he taught himself how to run. Julius was a great runner. He went on to become a 2-time Olympian in the Atlanta Olympics and the Sydney Olympics. He captained the Ugandan athletics team. In 2008, when I met Julius, he was working as a pacemaker for the American athletes in Portland and sending most of his wage home to care for 11 orphans that he'd found living underneath a bus on a visit home in 2003. I didn't end up making it back in time for the Beijing Olympics. My foot healed, but I just wasn't fit enough in time, but I knew that I was in Portland to meet Julius. A few months later, my husband and I and my parents-in-law flew to Uganda, and we went to Julius and his wife Grace's wedding, and we met the 11 orphans and just saw the sheer devastation that 25 years of civil war had left in northern Uganda. And flying home, we felt like we had a responsibility to do something with what we'd seen. We felt burdened to do something. So we started the Love Mercy Foundation. Originally, we started just to get all of the 11 orphans sponsored by Australian families and start some community development projects in northern Uganda to help the people get back on their feet after the war. This year, our focus, and for the next 5 years, is our Sense for Seeds program. This year we're running Sense for Seeds with 7,000 women in northern Uganda. It's a micro-loan farming program, and it's breaking the cycle of poverty of entire families in Uganda. And by 2020, we hope to have 20,000 women in the program. So by the time I stood on the starting line at the London Olympics, God had turned it into so much more than just achieving a childhood dream. Those years in the wilderness, the 11 stress fractures, being diagnosed with the bone density of a 75-year-old woman at 16 years old, they hadn't been in vain. And in 6 weeks' time, I'll again stand on the starting line in Rio at that big sports carnival. But you know what I've been learning is that I can do everything that I can in my physical strength, and we can't expect to sit on our gifts and succeed. I have to do the training and be diligent and disciplined and tenacious and fight for it some days. But then in the midst of all that, I need to release my grip on it and loosen my grip and trust God with it. And that's a daily decision. And when I do that, what I'm finding is that it's releasing joy and peace, and I feel lighter when I run. I'm not burdened by worry and anxiety, but most importantly, it's releasing the ability to hear God and releasing the ability to walk across the playground at lunchtime in my sphere and share life and hope and Jesus. Amen.